Hey guys, this is the first episode in our Gundam build series and I'm super pumped to be doing it. It's something we really wanted to put together to help beginner builders and intermediate builders hopefully progress towards a decent custom build, or at least just get their feet wet, because I'm sick of hearing people saying they're afraid of it, so let's take it nice and slow and get it done. See you soon guys. Intro.
Shut up and sit down.
Hey guys. Although the Hobby Drop is primarily an online hobby tool selling site, we really wanted to segment our place as a resource for knowledge sharing and community building in 2020. We thought, what better way than to cover an entire build series that demonstrates how to do things in some different and hopefully easier ways. We really wanted to do all of this work using our tools that we sell so that people could see them in action, but we also wanted to demonstrate some alternative uses for things you might already have in your toolbox. So what we noticed going through God knows how many videos on YouTube is that nothing really deals with the intermediate level builder. Everything currently on YouTube is kind of either super basic or really advanced. The likes of Ravipla and Genic, and that's kind of intimidating. So we wanted to do something that was easy enough for a beginner to follow along with, but also challenging enough that an intermediate builder can get something out of it. We wanted to cover every part of a project, not just the specific techniques you might see on individual videos. We really wanted to include the theoretical stuff that goes onto a project, but for some reason no one seems to talk about. Things like project structure and inspiration, or color choices. We really wanted to create a single playlist that walks through an entire custom build. And the main reason behind that is, quite frankly, because I hate having to dig through an hour and a half of stream footage to find one damn technique. The goal is to have techniques and concepts split into easy to find individual videos if you ever need to refer back to them. But at the same time, you can definitely watch the entire playlist through for one big experience. Throughout it all, I want to narrate what I'm doing, but really take some time to explain my thought process as I go. I'll really do my best not to ramble, but I can't make any promises. I'll probably talk a lot through my failures and how I fix them, because I get sick of not seeing people fail, and that really puts me off. It kind of intimidates me when I see something done flawlessly every time. So rest assured, I'll probably screw up and I'll probably put it on camera, but I'll show you how to fix it every time as well to hopefully build your confidence up as we go. We're going to provide full links to everything we use in the description, as well as feature overlays for tools and paints throughout every vid. If you see anything that we haven't identified, please comment. Please let us know so we can tell you as soon as we can. I hate it when I'm watching a video and I see something super awesome, but I have absolutely no idea how to get it. All of the links are probably going to be to our store, honestly, but if we don't stock it, then we're still going to list it in the description for you. And ideally give you a link to where you can get it from, or give you some keywords that you can start Googling to find one of your own. So, what can you guys expect from this build series? Well, we've planned on around 7 videos in total at this stage. I'm likely going to change that depending on the feedback. This first video is going to show which kit we're working on, obviously the SD Zaku, as well as go into some of the differences between the SD and CS frame, sorry this bit, chicken legs. And hopefully I'll touch on my process around projects and what ideas I'm going to try for the custom work. I also want to explain how I get inspiration or where I go to start building out what I think I'm going to do for a project. The second video we're going to cover custom frame modifications. We'll use pla plate, styrene, plasticard, whatever you choose to call it, and brass rods to show how to change the size, proportions, and the shape of the frame itself. And the same techniques will apply to extending panels and shrinking panels as well. The third video will be all about kit bashing and custom building other parts from scratch. We want to do that with both pla plate as well as additively using things like kit bashing to at least get structures together, and I'll explain all of that in the video. The fourth vid will deal with putty and epoxy work, and this one's probably going to be a bit longer. It'll mostly be gap filling and basic sculpting techniques, and really trying to demystify the use of putty for sculpting and gap filling in Gundam and other hobbies. We notice a lot of people are really adverse to playing with this stuff, and you really shouldn't be. Our fifth video is going to be super interesting. It's going to be all about up detailing with scribing work, fixing scribing failures, because I'm definitely going to screw that up, and general cleanup steps as well, and what you can do when you inevitably don't scribe the way you want to. The sixth video is going to be all about pre-paint work, your priming, resanding, and priming again type deal. While it'll mostly be just your normal music and paint video, I'd really like to touch on the process around different end finishes, and then briefly chat about things like texture in your paint, or what you can do to smooth surfaces out when, you really can't be bothered sanding for the 400th time. Now, the seventh and final part, I plan on showing painting and masking as well as some lazy guy hacks for both. But I'd also like to maybe keep this slot open for any topics you guys might bring up or anything you really want to see. So if you think of anything, please fire me a message, hit me up in the comments, drop me a line and let me know what you want to see covered or explain more so I can tack in extra videos if needed. Okay, let's chat CS frame for a second. It's pretty hard to get information on this thing, so I really wanted to have a segment in here that deals with it specifically and hopefully explain why you would or wouldn't want to use one. Now there's a 2 cm total height difference, and this is done thanks to the addition of thigh and bicep sections. These are important because it gives you an elbow and a knee joint that you otherwise don't have on the standard SD frame. One thing you don't hear about a lot is the extra movement in the collarbone. If you look at the neck joint, just to the left and right of that, where the shoulders connect, those parts actually slide in and out away from the head, which can change the proportions of your suit dramatically. So it's a pretty cool extra feature. Really, the CS frame is worth it if you plan on reposing your kits frequently, or if you want to use your SD to be doing something super dynamic, like super dynamic melee strikes or some cool combat pose. But if you use static poses or don't really want to move them around much, then I'd probably say the SD frame is perfectly fine. There's no need to go and pay for the extra. In this build series, I'll be using the SD frame and showing you how to modify it to suit the posing and proportions we want anyway. I'll be saving the CS frame for later projects because it's a high cost to burn through them just on really quick SD builds. Okay, so the cross silhouette booster. I couldn't find any pics, so here's one. You get a whole bunch of stuff, hands, knees, some extras down the bottom there. You do, however, need the CS frame to use any of these. They're designed to be used with the joints. Not really worth it in my personal opinion, they just slightly change the look. So, weigh that up when you're making your purchase. I certainly don't think it's necessary, but you'll know whether it is for you.
What's up guys, me again. So I apologize for the next section, it is very theory heavy. There's not a lot of visual. I'm going to try and do my best to keep it interesting and probably talk over the top of it, but it's important that you get through it, at least the first time, because it's a pretty good insight into kind of how I go about structuring a project, and I've had a lot of questions about it, so I'll do my best to not make it too boring, I promise. Alright, enjoy. The first thing I do is I ask myself a series of what questions. I'm hoping these what questions at least kind of help you guys figure out exactly what you want to do. You're probably asking yourself some already. If you're not, fine, these might help. If you are, maybe they don't, you can just skip to the next part. But the first thing I do is I ask, what do I need to consider? Are there specific kits at play? Do I need specific build-off requirements? Are there parts I just really want to use? Like I'm building a gunner warrior because it has a giant gun. It's awesome. Why wouldn't I? Am I just trying to make something cool? That's a perfectly valid reason to build stuff. Is it a ground type? Is it space-based? Is it flat-based? High mobility, heavy weapon, full armor? Any of those kinds of questions, you really need to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And that's where I start. Everything else is built off of that. So take some time and figure that out first. After that, you can move to things like, should it be grounded in realism? Am I going to have to deal with things like gravity and proper plate placement and rivets? And is it based on an existing concept? Is there an existing suit or project that I'm trying to emulate or at least borrow ideas from, which is a nice way of saying copy? Or is it something I'm really trying to make up off the top of my head? The last thing I'd kind of question is, do I understand the colors I want to use for this project? Are there a spread of specific colors I really want to paint, and I'm trying to build something that will best complement that combination, which is not so much of a thing in Gundam land, but it should be. A lot of people kind of hit the painting stage and then just go blank and wonder why what they had in their head doesn't necessarily work for what they now have in front of them. So try and consider that at the start if you want it. You don't have to lock it in, but have a pretty good idea. It really, really helps when you're building things. You might want to put plates in different combinations or allow more panel separation so that you can delve in and use more colors that you want to use later on. So keep that in mind. Now, once you've figured those out, I tend to then go into my inspiration places. And that's where this bad boy comes in. Once I have all my what's answered, I then go to things like Instagram, Pinterest, Discord. Just ask people, like look at other people's projects, go see some build nights, go to a local hobby store, look around for inspiration, but you'll have a rough idea of what you're looking for now. And that's why I think the what question is important first. Then we can step into Instagram and Pinterest and stuff. So like on Instagram, now I know exactly what I'm looking for. I'll come through and I'll look up specific hashtags, or I'll drive through from other projects that I know are very similar to what I'm looking for. That'll at least narrow it down, and I'll start assembling dozens and dozens and dozens of saved photos because I'm obsessive. You don't have to be. Pinterest is the best. Pinterest is the best. There is no other place that has such a massive source of inspiration. I would suggest creating a series of boards and subboards that filter things into those little genres or those little topics that you figured out in the first section. As you can see here, this is just a kind of a screen grab of what I've got going on. And I kind of subcategorize things by what I'm looking at, right? I deal with 40K, scratch building, mech inspiration, paint schemes, BWC stuff. There's a whole bunch of other boards off to the side here. And then I'll have all of the pics that I've saved, and this is the rabbit hole. Because once you start saving a few into a board, you can then jump in that board and it's going to recommend like for like pictures, and you can be there for days. So gather as much inspiration content there as you can, because it's going to be absolutely invaluable when you start designing and trying to figure out how to execute. Now, for execution. In this instance,
it was Pinterest that kind of gave me the idea for this entire project. And it was because I saw this bad boy down here, which is kind of hard to see on camera. You'll see more of him in a sec. But what I do is I then take that picture and then I try and figure out how I'm going to build or do this. And that's what we're going to do for this build series. We're going to pick 1 or 2 pictures, we're going to break it down, and then figure out maybe how we could build it at least to a level that we think is close enough. So what I did first was I grabbed that pic and I printed it out in grayscale. Right? Let me get rid of this bad boy now. Now the reason I do grayscale first is pretty simple. If this is filled with color, I find that I get very, very confused. Right? I start looking where the artist wanted me to look rather than looking at the entirety of the picture itself. So always try and grayscale it. It then also helps you visualize where you're going to want to put color later on, right? You can then come in and do something as simple as, I want that in blue, I want that in green, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to use Photoshop. Doing something like this as an exercise will at least help you get a visualization in front of you to work from. It's important to build a blueprint, which is what we're going to do next. So what I would do is I would take this and I would now try and figure out how I would build this. I've decided this is what I want. It's very similar to this. I'm going to try and make a ground-based suit. There's obviously no high mobility. There's obviously no space components. And I want this giant-ass axe, right? We're back on those what questions. This is what came out of those what questions. So now I would look at this and I would break it right down. I would look at individual elements and try and address them. So I would look at the shoulder pad, right? And if we have a look at the original Zaku here, for instance, you'll see that the shoulder pads don't exactly match, but this one's pretty close. So I can remove the spikes, right? Then I can add the rings. Maybe I'll drill in these little holes. I'm not fixed on that yet. Maybe I'll change the shape of the shoulder pad. Not sure. This one, again, if we look at the original Zaku, you'll notice is completely different. So I'm going to have to do something pretty crazy for the shoulder pad, and I'm not sure what yet. I think we'll do some press molding, or we'll do some scratch building out of putty and plasticard. We might just take a copy of this and then start modifying it. So we'll just write scratch, build, in the world's most hideous handwriting. So I'm going to have to scratch, build. The axe is obviously scratch build. These awesome little toe spikes. Definitely want that on there. Scratch that out of ply plate. These little ring paper clips. Right, so paper clip. Now this middle piece is somewhat easily identifiable, so we'll definitely have to add ply plate to the middle section there to replicate that. These mostly flow. These are smaller and black, but I might have to use putty to sculpt. This backpack is completely scratch built as well. So once we've pulled this apart and we've figured out all the individual components, at least at a high level, I then go away and I try and make some kind of more finalized version. You don't have to do this. I do it purely because it helps me then figure out the details while I'm typing it up. So you can see here I've gone through and I've kind of listed all of the general changes, things I'll need probably across the whole suit. Things like scribing the rings, the mounting points, reinforcing armor plates is going to happen pretty much across the board. Structural and framework changes. So one of the most important things here that is going to be present on the entire suit is I'm actually going to have to change the proportions, again, look at our little Zaku, of this entire suit to at least be closer. I'm not going to get it the same because that's why I'm working with an SD, but I am going to have to reinforce and extend the arms as well as the legs. Again, more of the same stuff: scratch build, press molding, need for upper arm builds, removing and adding notches and some hinges in here to get this kind of military plating rounded effect instead of just the normal SD Zaku kind of vibe. One really interesting part that I didn't really touch on before is this, and it's something that was actually immediately eye-catching and one of the main reasons I picked it. Building this cape. I want to create a torn fabric cape to make it look like he's wandering through a wasteland on a mission for an extended period of time, and he's literally just dragging his covers and stuff with him for high heat or whatever he wants to do through a desert. So I thought I was done here, but then I saw something else. I was going through No Man's No Dead, the actual artist for this, his DeviantArt account, and I found this bad boy, which led me into a crazy spiral of which one am I going to do now, because badass. So again, same exercise. Now, after asking a whole bunch of people, Discord communities, other hobbyists, what I thought of doing was combining the two. So what I think I'm going to do now is keep the axe, keep the pose from this bad boy. I'm going to use his lower half, but I'm going to use the top half as much as possible from this one. So, once you understand how you intend to break down each of these, it's really, I wouldn't say easy, but it's much easier to now go, okay, great, if I'm going to do this, and it needs to be scratch built from pla plate, and this needs to be scratch built from pla plate, and this does, well, suddenly I understand what I'm trying to build out of pla plate in advance. For my sculpting, I can figure out when I have to do all of my sculpting. Do I do it first? Do I do my up detailing first? This is where I start kind of pulling it apart and putting it into some kind of timeline for a project. And this is the same for anything, for Gundam, for minis, for busts, for Marque, for anything. Okay, so now we have all of these. We look through all of the activities and we figure out priority. That's the main thing. I think the first thing we're going to have to do is figure out the proportions of the unit we want to do. We'll probably do fixed pose because I'm going to have to use pla plate to scratch build a frame. Not an entire frame, but I'll use the existing SD frame to at least extend and try and match some of the proportions of the lower half of this and the top half of this. We'll try and pull the proportions in place and get something cool going on. Anyway.
You guys made it. I'm proud. I'm super proud. Thank you so much for watching and putting up with how dry this was. The next ones will be so much more impressive, I promise. And I'd really appreciate it if you liked, subscribed, hit the bell. You know the drill. We're all adults. I don't want to spam anyone. Have a good one, guys.
That's all for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. You may or may not already be thinking about if I kind of bring this could easily follow, and nope, wasn't even looking at camera. Based, is it ground based? Is there gravity? Is there not gravity? All that kind of stuff. And I fucked that already. Great work. That was a meh.